the past few weeks, protests have broken out from all over the United States, from Chicago to New York and to other local communities. But one thing is clear.
Imagine how tired the people who are experiencing it feel. We need to keep pushing and keep working together until we have real, lasting change.
L10 News has gathered your stories and perspectives of the protests in the United States and from around the world. The stories that represent the diverse community of our school make this documentary a reality. You will now hear the voices of the brave student leaders and faculty of Lawrenceville that speak their names.
So, can you describe what you're seeing right now from where you live?
I live in Chicago, and I went to a protest Saturday, and it was definitely very, it was a lot. You could feel, the passion, the energy, the anger of the crowd when you were marching, and, luckily I was, safe. I got out before it got dark, but I did have, a friend who was arrested, and it was just, a very scary weekend.
So for me, I live in, West Windsor, New Jersey, and I went to a protest that was in Princeton, which is 15, 20 minutes away, and a lot of people showed up for that. But other than that, I haven't really been seeing a lot of the big riots and stuff like that happening, at least in my area. But I have obviously seen it a lot on social media, especially on Twitter and Instagram.
I'm in the Bronx, New York. I'm in New York City. I'm in an epicenter of a lot of protests. I've gotten a lot of information from social media. However, because I do have a lot of friends here in the Bronx that do go to protests, I have heard a lot of their stories about how specifically most recently, how police actually kept a group of protesters from going to the train station so that they could make the curfew with what we were going to assume is the intent of being able to legally arrest the protesters. And just hearing the pain and the passion in the voice of my friends as they talk about their anger.
Most of my information comes from the internet, so various news sources, social media, and hearing my American friends' perspectives.
Most of the protests in my neighborhood have been peaceful for the most part. I haven't been involved in one yet. I've just been seeing them a lot driving by, but there has been a lot of conflict between the people protesting and the people who don't want to see the protesters. They're saying that the protesters shouldn't be there. A lot of people have been saying that they have no need to the people should not be protesting because it doesn't even relate to these incidents. So a lot of people have been saying that people in my neighborhood don't have the right to protest, or they shouldn't be protesting.
On a closer level at Lawrenceville, I definitely saw last week it was a bit quieter on the Lawrenceville side of reaction. I felt like our classes were pretty normal when the world around us was anything but normal.
We are witnessing a singular moment in American history. Make no mistake about that. There is no African American of my generation that I have talked to in the last 3 weeks who anticipated what we are seeing in our streets right now.
I would say that a lot of the comments about the protests have noted that how many different types of people, whether it's ethnicities or where you're from, have really come together under these protests and under the Black Lives Matter movement. And so what do you think sparked this drive to have such unity of different types of people under one movement and protesting together?
Most people of color, of different races, genders, sexualities have also been oppressed. I feel like a lot of people misunderstand the Black Lives Matter movement. For me, that's just the label, that's the title. But there are so many people from different backgrounds that fall underneath that movement, because we're not just fighting only for Black lives. We're fighting for all the other injustices that everyone has faced.
You recently wrote a dense email that encapsulates your anger and sorrow to the administration. What brought you to this breaking point and exposing the way the school handles situations like these?
The reason that I texted Aisha in the first place was because that day, I think that was either Thursday night or Friday night, in math class, which was my E-period class, our teacher spoke out and she said, this makes me uncomfortable and this isn't something that I usually do, but I feel that it's a topic that we need to talk about, so if you want to express any feelings about George Floyd, And there was silence for a minute, and then I gave a little statement, summary of what's going on, sources where you could donate and or sign petitions. And after that, she gave us another minute or two for anyone to talk, and nobody did. And seeing her say that in the beginning was very comforting, because that same morning I just felt so overwhelmed and had the longest 3-hour conversation just talking about my frustration with everything going on. But then by the end of that, I was so angry and frankly disappointed by the fact that no one said anything, that nobody had anything to say. And I wasn't the only, I can't say I'm not the only Black person in the class, because you can't force any person of color, especially a Black person, to talk about this with how much it hurts them. But this is a human problem, and nobody said anything. But I saw the potential for us to have productive conversations, so I reached out to Aisha and I asked her, I said, how can we make this happen? How can we send an email to make this happen?
Looking back into the history of the Black Lives Matter movement, how have these protests shown how much we have transformed in terms of activism?
I think I kind of struggle with this question because this movement is not new by any means. I think it's just been brought to light more, and I can't pinpoint the reason why this incident or these incidents were able to bring, I guess, so much more awareness, because these things have been happening constantly for the past years and decades. But I think these recent incidents have given the movement more power. I've seen more allies get involved than I've ever seen in my life. I've seen my friends who I didn't think would get involved. So I think the movement hasn't changed. It's just been given more power with the help of allies and others really taking that initiative to get involved.
I've seen a very great degree of new voices that are speaking out that are not the typical ones that you're always hearing, and I think that's always a great thing, and it's empowering to see that shift. I just hope that we keep this energy up and then it doesn't fade once, the hashtags fade or it's not trending.
We are talking about things that people should know, things that should be knowledge on call for anyone pretending to be capable of instructing the diverse kinds of students that we have in our classroom. Students need to know American history. They need to know the psychology of race, the way subconscious ideas and attitudes about race profoundly shape behavior. They need to know those things in order to do their job. Competence in these issues is not an add-on to teaching at Lawrenceville. It is an absolute requirement.
What are your backgrounds in diversity initiatives and other movements related to race equity and other similar areas to that?
I'm currently president of Latinos Unidos. I'm co-president with Ari Kojo. So I'm really excited about that because we have a lot of big plans coming up. One of them actually being that we started a Latinx coalition with other schools.
I am co-president of Diversity Council, the diversity rep on student council for next year, and editor-in-chief of In the Margins, which is a diversity magazine on campus.
I'm the other co-president for DIFCO next year. In addition to that, I am the co-founder and co-president of our African Student Union. I'm the co-president of Black Women at Lawrenceville. I also am the co-founder and co-captain of Afrobeats, which is an Afro-fusion dance group.
I am the vice president of Diversity Council, and on BWAL Council, which is the Black Women at Lawrenceville Club, I am the vice president of African Student Union, and Diversity Council.
I have co-founded the Pan Asian Alliance with two of my friends, Rachel and Sid. And I am also currently the president of the GSA at Lawrenceville.
My background in diversity, equity, and inclusion work includes working with the Religious Life Council, and I was lucky enough to lead it this year with Hamza and Ninika. I've also been a member of the Diversity Council for a little bit, and I attended the Student Diversity and Leadership Conference in Seattle last winter with Miss Akins, Miss Kossoff, and Dean Eldridge, and that was definitely a huge learning experience for me in terms of shaping my views and how passionate I am about this work.
I have served as the director of the Lawrenceville Rising Scholars Program, a summer program for incoming freshmen and second and third formers, to give them an introduction to the rigor and the pace of the Lawrenceville curriculum. I'm the founding director of that program. I started it in 2007, left it in 2011. It's still running. That's the thing that I am most proud of, because I think it continues to affect Lawrenceville by affecting the composition of the student body.
As one of the prominent Black Alliance groups on campus, how have these events tested your preparedness as an alliance for these events?
So I think for me, obviously we are leaders in the Black community on campus, and so you want to be available to your community members, and you want to, stand with them in solidarity and check up on them and make sure everything is okay. But also you need to check in on yourself, because this is affecting all of us. We're all members of the Black community. We're all scared at, the prevalent racism that we're seeing, in the media and in real life that is not going away and has been here for centuries. So we're all afraid, but we also want to build community with one another and be present for the other members of our Black community, especially the underclassmen.
As Assistant Director of Multicultural Affairs, how have these events affected the way we address issues like this from an administrative perspective?
Yeah, so I think as my role as the Assistant Director of Multicultural Affairs and working predominantly with the Diversity Council, I've kind of seen administrators start to really listen to student voice a little bit more. I think particularly when events like these happen, sometimes we get desensitized to them. Obviously, the situations that have happened recently with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery are appalling. But the truth is that those things have been happening kind of pretty much continuously over the past 10 years. And so I think what Lawrenceville tried to do in this particular situation is seize upon this moment where more people are listening, more people than ever are seeking out information and figuring out what their individual role is and trying to be responsive. But I think we have to give all credit to students, group of students kind of across a spectrum of backgrounds who said this is something that's really important for us. We're not just students in the Lawrenceville bubble. We're hearing all of these different things that are happening in the world, and they're affecting us personally and who we are in the classroom.
How has the international community kind of in general been responding to what is going on in the U.S.?
America is in some ways the center of the world's attention constantly. Right? Across the world in general, we are seeing protests and people speaking up in favor of the Black Lives Matter protests, and also resisting their own racism in their own countries. It's important that the international community has rallied together in support of the Black Lives Matter movement more recently, because it I think it almost brings hope to Americans to see that there are other people around the world, not just us, who care, who are willing to take risks and make sacrifices for the sake of justice. And it also shows the policymakers that that the repercussions of this aren't just like within America. It's when it's a situation of morality or justice, it becomes like humanity's issue.
So what are the best ways for Lawrentians to make an effective impact and compel the world to positive change for this movement?
Definitely. I think there are 3 big ways the Lawrenceville community can get involved. So first, that starts with the conversations we're having in class. Be an active member, an active listener, an active talker, and want to learn. Be interested not just because it looks good, but because you actually care about what's going on. Second, donate. There are plenty of good ways to donate. There are links in people's bios, and I know that ABC and Honolulu Your Worship Committee have been sending out great resources. And third, if you're not in a place where you can be donating, there are petitions you can sign, numbers you can text, and of course, voting is a huge, huge thing.
I think that it's really important, obviously, that we're having these house meeting and school meeting discussions because, I think we should acknowledge the fact that not every school in America is doing this. And I've heard from my friends who, are saying, yeah, like our teachers haven't acknowledged it. We haven't talked about it at all. And I'm really appreciative of the fact that we can have these conversations, and just sort of make it a part of how we function as a school, not like putting off these current events because everyone sees it, making it normal to talk about it.
How will the current protests change the way Lawrenceville addresses these events in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
So I think the current protests, I hope will change a couple of things. I think that, I guess I'll start with one thing that I hope will continue. I hope and expect that when students kind of raise something that's important to them, that they want to talk about with their teachers and their classmates and in their classes, that the faculty and administration will be responsive to those needs. As I kind of mentioned at the beginning, our hope is to kind of help create a world where this stuff doesn't happen, but as long as it does happen, we need to figure out a way to talk about it. And I kind of view how we ended this spring term as kind of the first step of practice in figuring out how we have these conversations. So I think this could look like one model of Lawrenceville being responsive to world events.
The good thing is, I think because this has been so student-led and you can feel the passion and the anger, it genuinely feels like a lot of the student body is sincerely willing to learn and learn to do better. And I really hope that is an energy we can carry on into the fall. I mean, if that's the energy when we're all apart in the spring, then I can't imagine what it's going to be like if we're hopefully back together on campus in the fall.
We live in ever closer proximity to people who do not look like us. We must dismantle those murderous fictions of race that make it very, very difficult for us to live together in harmony.
People are willing to fight for what they can't see, or people are more willing to fight for what they can see.
Imagine how tired the people who are experiencing it feel. We need to keep pushing and keep working together until we have real, lasting change.
In response to the outpouring of emotion across the nation and the call to action by students, Lawrenceville allowed for time and space within the last week of classes to reflect about the events surrounding the death of George Floyd. In the Bearing Witness project, students were able to discuss their feelings and create artifacts, a reflection of our community's collective experience and memory of this moment. Some students created poems, prayers, or paintings. Others wrote letters to local government leaders. Important conversations are underway that will allow for more personal and collective growth in the future. Thank you for tuning in to this L10 documentary. Despite being on summer break, if you have a story to tell, please contact us by email or DM us on one of our social media platforms. Thank you for tuning in.